Hello friends, welcome to video series on geography. In this video, I'll be explaining about mountain building process or orogeny. There are different kinds of mountains, namely fold mountains, block mountains, volcanic mountains. I'll be explaining them in detail, and also I'll be explaining about important mountain ranges in the world. Mountain building processes are tectonic movements that involve folding of sediments, faulting and metamorphism of Earth's crust. To understand mountain building or orogeny, it is important for us to understand basic principles underlying the formation of mountains like faulting, folding, etc. In this picture, we see how faulting takes place. There are different types of faults: normal fault, thrust fault, transcurrent or transform fault. These faults happen mainly because of compressive or tensile forces acting on parts of Earth's crust. For example, under tensile forces, that is where two blocks are pulled away from each other, then a block in between them would simply slide below, which leads to normal fault. It is because of extension or tensile forces. In the other kind of fault, where two blocks push the block in between from each sides, then the block would rise. This is called thrust fault, and this is due to compression, and it is also called as a reverse fault. In the other kind of fault, which is transcurrent or transform fault, the blocks of Earth's crust simply slide horizontally. Thus, there is no upward or downward movement involved. There is only horizontal movement involved. Hence, this is called as horizontal movement or faults happening due to horizontal movements, whereas the other two are happening due to vertical movements, or the other two involve vertical movements. Another important basic concept in orogeny is folding. Folding is a process in which two continental crustal plates move towards each other, compressing the sediments that are present in between these two plates. And as a result of this compression, this sediment undergoes deformations, giving rise to a fold. As you can see in this figure, the folds can be of different types. For example, if the slope of the fold is upwards, then it is called as an anti-syncline, and if the slope of the fold is downwards, then it is called syncline. Also, there are various other folds like recumbent fold, etc., which we'll be seeing in detail later. Now let us see classification of mountains on the basis of location. The mountains are classified into continental mountains and oceanic mountains based on their location, whether they are present on continents or in oceans. And in continental mountains, there are coastal mountains and inland mountains. The examples for coastal mountains are Rockies in western part of North America, Appalachians, which are eastern part of USA, Alpine mountains, which are in northern Italy, that is southern Europe, Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats, which are parts of India. And in inland mountains, there are mountains such as Vosges and Black Forest, which are part of Europe, mainly present in Germany and France. Then the other peaks other ranges such as Kunlun, Tian Shan and Altai, which are parts of Asia, that is surrounding China, Kazakhstan, etc. And Urals of Russia, Aravallis, Satpura and Michael range of India. These ranges are present in central part of India, whereas Aravallis are a part of western India, present in Rajasthan. And coming to oceanic mountains, they are found both on continental shelves as well as ocean floors. We'll see in detail when discussing oceanography. And one important factoid is that Mount Kia, which is around 9,000 meters high from its mountain base, can be considered as the highest mountain in the world if its height is considered from mountain base instead of sea level. Now, the highest mountain in the world is Mount Everest. It is about 8,850 meters above sea level, but this mountain is only 4,000 meters above sea level, but if its height is considered from the base, it would be about 9,000 meters. And let us see the location of different mountains we have discussed. Vosges Mountains, which is a part of northeastern France, Black Forest, which is a part of western Germany, and Ural Mountains, which divide Europe from Asia. They are present in Russia. They are the most major industrial mineral base of Russia. You can see broad picture of Ural mountains. The other mountains like Himalayan mountains in India, Kunlun mountains which are part of China and Himalayan system, Tian Shan mountains bordering Kazakhstan, and major part of the mountain is present in China. Altai mountains which are at the convergence of all these four countries, namely Russia, Mongolia, China and Kazakhstan. And mountains are also divided on the basis of period of origin. Since the birth of Earth, there has been nearly 9 orogenic or mountain building processes. Most of the mountain building processes took place in pre-Cambrian times, which is from birth of universe till 500 million years ago. And the most important and the recent mountain building processes are called as Caledonian, Hercynian and Alpine systems, which we will discuss in detail. Precambrian mountains are the mountains which are born during Precambrian supereon. Precambrian supereon extends from since the birth of Earth till 500 million years ago. That is, they extend up to 4 billion years. And these mountains are now just remained in the form of residual mountains because of various generational processes like erosion, weathering, etc. So only their residual parts are found now. The best examples are Laurentian mountains, which are part of North America, and also Algoman mountains. Both these mountains surround the Great Lake region. And Caledonian mountains are the mountains which originated during great mountain building processes that took place between late Silurian and early Devonian periods. Let's see what are these geological time periods. And this is how timeline of Earth is divided into supereons and then eons, then eras, periods, etc. And if you see, after the end of Precambrian supereon, it is Phanerozoic eon, which consists of Paleozoic era. And in Paleozoic era, which ranges from 570 to 225 million years ago, there are periods such as Silurian and Devonian periods, and the great mountain building process took place between these two periods, that is from 440 million years ago to 395 million years ago. And the Caledonian mountains were formed during this period. And these mountains have northeast southwest alignment in northwestern part of Europe and also in the northeastern part of North America. So they are formed about 430 million years ago to 380 million years ago. And the best examples are Appalachians, which are present in northeastern part of USA, and Aravallis and Mahadevo hills, which are part of western and central India. So these are the parts of Caledonian mountains. The Appalachians, which are part of northeastern USA, and their counterparts are present in northern Canada, southern Greenland and parts of Iceland, and few mountains in Scandinavia or the countries namely Norway, Sweden, etc. So all these parts were the same system of mountains called as Caledonian mountains, which were formed about 380 million years ago. As the continents moved away due to plate tectonics, we can see these mountain residues remaining in different continents. And in India, there are mountains such as Aravallis, which are part of western India, and Mahadevo, Maikala, etc., which are in central India. All these also come under Caledonian mountains. And the next type of mountains are called as Hercynian mountains. These mountains are comparatively younger compared to Caledonian mountains. They are formed in between 340 million years ago to 225 million years ago, that is during Carboniferous to Permian period. And in geological time scale, Carboniferous is about 345 million years ago, that is soon after Devonian period, that is after the ending of the formation of Caledonian mountains, and they lasted till 280 million or 240 million years, that is until the Permian period, which ends with the start of Mesozoic era. So the formation of Hercynian mountains took place between these two periods. And these type of mountains, that is Hercynian mountains, are found mostly in parts of Europe and Asia. They are residual mountains. Much of them are very small peaks or sometimes remains as small plateaus, etc. Some examples of Vosges and Black Forest, which we have seen. Vosges is a part of northeastern France, and Black Forest mountains are part of western Germany. And there are other mountains like Veriscan mountains, which are also part of Europe. Altai and Tian Shan, we have seen these mountains, the location of these mountains too. These mountains are part of Assyrian mountain building process. And Ural mountains of Russia, Pennines and Welsh Islands in Britain, and Harz mountains in Germany, and high plateaus of Serbia and China. All these mountains are Hercynian mountains, which are formed about 340 to 225 million years ago, that is between Carboniferous to Permian period. And the next mountain system is Alpine mountain system, which is the youngest and the most recent significant mountain building process on Earth. And this has originated during Tertiary period, that is about 65 million years to 77 million years ago. That is, they are very recent mountains. They are spread, their formation is spread across all these time periods like Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, etc., which are part of Tertiary period. The best example for these mountains are Rockies of North America and Alpine mountains of Europe. We have seen the location of these two mountains, and Atlas mountains, which are present in northwestern Africa. We'll see the location of these mountains too. And the parts of Himalayas, there are various ranges, namely Paminot, Taurus, Elbrus, Zagros, and Kunlun, which forms part of mountain system in just above Himalayas, that is in Central Asia. And the most important feature of these mountains is that they have they are loftiest, that is have very high peaks. This is because they, being the youngest, have been subjected to little amount of weathering and erosional processes. And since these mountains are formed mainly due to tectonic processes, their summits are rising with the passage of time. Hence, these mountains are the loftiest and the most rugged mountain system in the world. And based on the mode of origin, mountains are further divided into tectonic mountains, which involve fold mountains, block mountains, and volcanic mountains. All these are tectonic mountains. And other ones are residual mountains. Residual mountains are simply the mountains which are left after various denudational processes have stripped the surfaces of the tectonic mountains. And now we'll see the major types of mountains, namely fold mountains, block mountains, and volcanic mountains, which are all of tectonic origin. And the first and the most important types of mountains are fold mountains, which are spread all across the world, and they are the most important system of mountains. They are formed when sedimentary rock strata in geosynclines are subjected to compressive forces. We have seen while discussing folding process that two crustal plates, when they move towards each other due to various compressive forces acting on them, then the sediments present between these two plates undergo folding, that is increase in height. The folding might be upwards or sometimes even downwards, but in most of the cases the folding will be upwards. And this depression which holds all these sediments is called as geosyncline. Thus, when two crustal plates involve crushing of a geosyncline, then the sedimentary rock strata present between these in this geosynclines undergo folding, and these are mainly due to compressive forces. These mountains are the loftiest mountains. We have already seen this, that is, they have most imposing height compared to other kinds of mountains. And on the basis of different kinds of folds, they are divided into simple fold mountains and complex fold mountains. We'll see about them in detail. Simple fold mountains are mountains which have simple wave-like structures, whereas complex fold mountains are the ones where these wave-like structures gets deformed under various forces and gives rise to various kinds of folds, namely overfold, recumbent fold, or overthrust fold. So these kind of folds are called as complex fold mountains. That is, mountains formed due to this kind of complex folding is called as complex fold mountains. We can see different folds, namely recumbent fold, overthrusted fold, asymmetric folds. Asymmetric folds are the ones where one side of the mountain has very less amount of slope, whereas other side it's very steep. And when rocks of this recumbent fold, which undergo breaking and various under various physical stress will fall apart and will be carried away due to various erosional and depositional activities, and these rock particles which are carried away are called as nappy. That is, overfolds and recurrent folds are detached from their roots and carried away few kilometers due to tectonic forces, and these structures which are detached and carried away are called as nap. And on the basis of origin, fold mountains are further divided into young fold mountains, old fold mountains, and very old fold mountains. And the mountains that are formed in tertiary period are called as young fold mountains, and the mountains that formed before tertiary period are called as old fold mountains and very old fold mountains. For example, Caledonian and Hassinian and Aravallis of India and Vindhyachal mountains are examples of old fold mountains because they were formed about 300 million years ago, which is much before tertiary period. And these mountains have thickening relict, as they are called as thickening relict fold mountains. That is, at the location of these mountains, the thickness of the crust is ever increasing because of various denudational processes and isostatic equilibrium. The Earth's crust is in isostatic equilibrium, that is, the relative densities are more or less the same. For example, if there is a high plateau in one region and the surrounding region is comparatively at sea level, but at this stage they would have the same amount of densities, that is, this portion would have the same weight compared to, with respect to this portion. This is because though this is much lower compared to this region, it still is much denser compared to this region, thus it will have the same weight as compared to this whole mass. Thus the whole system is in isostatic equilibrium. But when there is a change happening, that is when a mountain is formed somewhere here, then it will lead to the change in isostatic equilibrium. Under these circumstances, this region comes down and this region is lifted to an extent where the isostatic equilibrium is restored. And under this kind of processes, the fold mountains will undergo further downward movement, giving rise to more or less a kind of a system where a fold mountains becomes somewhat like a residual mountain, leading to thickness of the Earth's crust. Thickness is increasing over all this region. This is called thickening relict, and they are called as thickening relict fold mountains. And the new fold mountains, that is the mountains that are formed during tertiary period, are such as Rockies, Alps, and Himalayas, are much younger compared to these kind of old fold mountains are thickening relict fold mountains. And coming to the characteristics of fold mountains, they are the youngest mountain system on Earth. They are only about 300 to 400 million years old compared to the mountains of Precambrian era, and they are fossiliferous as they are made up of sedimentary rocks, and they extend for great lengths. For example, Rockies and Ends, etc., which are about 3 to 4,000 kilometers in length, and they have concave slope on one side and convex slope on the other side. This is very general characteristic, and as we have seen, they are found mostly along continental margins with few exceptions like Himalayas, which are found between continents, and they are found to have granite intrusions because of their sedimentary nature, and they undergo recurrent seismicity, or this is because of very young nature, and as these mountains are continuously evolving and as the plates move towards each other, there is chances that there is too much of earthquakes in these regions, hence they have recurrent earthquakes taking place. For example, Indo-Nepal border is one example where earthquakes have been very frequent, and sometimes there might be volcanic activity too. In Himalayas, the volcanic activity is very rare, but in Ends and various other fold mountains, volcanic activity is widespread, and these mountains are the most widespread mountain systems on Earth. They might even contain minerals resources such as tin, copper, gold, etc. While studying plate tectonics, we have seen that different kinds of interactions takes place between two crustal plates. For example, if plates move towards each other, they'll give rise to convergent edge, which is destructive in nature, and if they move away from each other, they'll give rise to a divergent edge which is constructive in nature. And in mountain building process, most of the time it is convergence of two plates that is involved, and based on different kinds of plates involved, they are further classified as ocean-ocean convergence, ocean-continent convergence, continent-continent convergence, and continent-island arc convergence. And the first one is ocean-ocean convergence or island arc convergence. In this case, a denser continental plate. The first one is ocean-ocean convergence or island arc convergence. In this kind of convergence, an oceanic plate which is denser plunges below an oceanic plate which is less denser. For example, this is the oceanic plate which is denser, which is plunging into an oceanic plate which is less denser. And this zone where the oceanic plate plunges below the less denser oceanic plate is called a subduction zone. And the subduction results in extreme amount of pressures created in the neighborhood, thus metamorphosizing the rocks surrounding it. Thus, under intense heat and pressure, these rocks converts into magma, and this magma flows out in the form of volcanic eruptions. And the volcanic lava which is flowing out might result in a landmass which is called as oceanic arc. That is, when it appears above sea level, it's called oceanic arc. One example for this is Japan, which is formed by ocean-ocean convergence. And at the zone of subduction, we see that there will be a trench formed, and this kind of convergence will lead to the formation of a continental crust replacing the oceanic crust. For example, Japan, which is found on the continental crust, slowly raised upwards due to volcanic activity and become a continental crust. The next one is continent-ocean convergence, or this is also called as Cordilleran convergence. This is because the Western Cordilleran mountains, which are part of North America, were formed due to this kind of convergence. Here, an oceanic plate which is quite denser plunges below a continental plate which is comparatively less denser, giving rise to the upthrusting of the continental plate. That is, this plate would upthrust or move upwards, giving rise to a landform similar to a mountain. The Rockies is an example which were formed due to this kind of convergence. And here too, the rocks will be metamorphosized and sometimes might lead to less intense volcanoes. The other one is continent convergence. One good example is in Himalayan convergence, where the Indian plate, which is a continental plate, has plunged below Asian plate, which is also a continental plate, but Himalayan plate or Indian plate, being quite denser, has plunged below this plate, leading to the upthrust of the Asiatic plate, giving rise to Himalayas. And mountains such as Alps, Urals, etc. are produced due to this kind of convergence. The next one is continent arc convergence, that is where a continental plate plunges below an oceanic arc, that is plate consisting of arc islands like Japan Islands. This kind of convergence is quite rare and is observed in New Guinea, which is formed due to this kind of convergence. And in this figure we can see the formation of island arcs in this plane. This is formed mainly due to ocean-ocean convergence. In the next type, that is ocean and continent convergence, which might lead to raised mountain system like Andes, Rockies, etc. This is the example of ocean-continent convergence. Next type is a continent-continent convergence. We can see a continental plate here is colliding with the continent plate here. The denser one will subduct or will lead to a subduction zone, giving rise to mountain system just like Himalayas. So this is what happens in folding. When two plates move together, it will lead to compression, and then one plate which is weaker might fold, or a plate can plunge below other and the one will raise. This is called thrusting. And the same way, sometimes when at the subduction, due to subduction process, they might give rise to a trench, or sometimes simply the plates would thicken and this give rise to thickening, which is very rare. And coming to the different types of mountains depending on their age, there are young fold mountains, old fold mountains, and very old fold mountains. Himalayas are the examples of young fold mountains. They have rugged relief and they are lofty, that is, they have very high peaks and their peaks are conical in shape. Whereas the old fold mountains have slightly rounded features, medium elevation. One good example is Aravalli range in India. They have been considerably owed down due to weathering process, thus they have slightly rounded features. And coming to very old fold mountains, Appalachians and Ural mountains are the examples of very old fold mountains. They have highly rounded features and they are of low elevation. The next important kind of mountains are called as block mountains. In these mountains, the earth's crust is displaced vertically, where the ones that is at higher elevation is called as host and at the lower elevation is called graben. In this kind of mountain formation, mainly faulting occurs. We have discussed what is faulting in the beginning of the video. And in the faulting, due to tensile forces, that is where the forces are pulling two crustal masses away from each other, then they might result in subduction of a certain part of the region between them. This will give rise to a graben. Or in certain cases when two crustal masses are pushing against each other due to compressive forces, then there is chances that part of Earth's crust might get elevated, giving rise to a plateau-like structure. It is called as host. And the best example for these kind of mountains are Rhine Valley mountains and Vosges mountains. We are talking about Vosges mountains, that is the mountains in the eastern part of France. And these are called fault block mountains because faulting takes place in these kind of mountains. They mainly cause due to tensile strengths as well as compressive forces. There are two types of mountains under this. One is tilted block mountain and the other one is lifted block mountains. In tilted block mountains, one side has a very steep elevation, whereas other one has comparatively less steeper elevation. Because the block has been tilted, the block which was horizontal might be tilted to a certain angle, giving rise to this kind of formation. And in lifted block mountains, we can see this is kind of lifted or subducted block mountain system. And the lifted block mountains have extremely flat slopes, we can see here. And this kind of mountain formation gives rise to rift valleys, etc. We can see the Great African Rift Valley, which is formed due to this kind of mountain building process, where the parts in the valley which got subducted due to the outward movement of the related Earth's crust. We'll see some more features of block mountains. We've seen that they are formed due to faulting. The example of Vosges and Black Forest mountains. The East African Rift Valley, the Great African Rift Valley is formed due to this kind of mountain building process. And due to denudation, these mountains undergo various structural changes, so they might appear differently after a certain period of time after formation. The other important kind of mountains are volcanic mountains, which are formed mainly due to volcanic activity. In this kind of mountains, magma, which is rich in silica, flows out, and as this is very viscous, forms successive layers around the peak of the mountain. So these successive layers might give rise to raising of the mountain, and this way mountains are built. For example, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa and Mount Fujiyama are formed in this kind of mountain building process. These are also called as mountains of accumulation because each time the magma flows out, it leads to accumulation of rock content one layer after the above. And few more examples of these kind of volcanic mountains are Mount Fujiyama, we have seen it's in Japan, Mount Mayon in Philippines, and the other one in Indonesia, Mount Merapi. And there are various other important mountains, volcanic mountains like Mount Krakatau, which is also in Indonesia. And in India, the mountains in barren islands are volcanic in nature. That is the only active volcano that exists in India, that is in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. But in mainland India, we have no active volcanoes. And all the mountains, namely fold mountains, block mountains, and volcanic mountains, undergo denudational process over a period of time, giving rise to residual mountains. These mountains have low elevations and well-rounded features, and these sometimes they just don't look like mountains. They might evolve in the form of plateaus, etc. And the examples being the highlands formed around the river Colorado in USA. These are some of the important mountain ranges across the world. Andes are the longest mountain system in the world, which are spread along the western margins of South America, and Rocky Mountains on the western margins of North America. Great Dividing Ridge is a part of Australia. Trans-Antarctic Mountains are a part of Antarctic region. Ural Mountains that divide Europe and Asia, and Atlas Mountains which are part of northwestern Africa. Appalachian Mountains which are in the eastern regions of USA. Himalayas between Indian subcontinent and Asia, mainland Asia, and Altai Mountains which are main part of China, which are at a region where the four countries, namely Kazakhstan, Russia, Mongolia, and China, converge. Western Ghats and Aravalli ranges are part of India. Alps are present in southern Europe, that is, in the northern parts of Italy, covering about 8 to 9 countries. And Drakensberg Mountains are in South Africa. We'll see all these mountains on a map. So, coming to the important mountain systems, these are Rockies, and these are Andes, which are on western margins of South America, and these are Atlas Mountains, and these are Alps, and Appalachians, which are a part of Caledonian Mountains, who have their counterparts in Greenland, Iceland, and Scandinavia. And Himalayas, here there are other few ranges like Kunlun, Altai. Altai is between the convergence of all these four countries here, and Tian Shan is somewhere here between Kazakhstan and China. And this is Drakensberg Mountains, which are part of South Africa. And the Great Dividing Ridge is a part of Australia. They are found on the western parts of Australia. These are the most important mountain systems. This region is called Great African Rift Valley, which is formed due to faulting of this block. This is a form of block mountain, block valley, rift valley created due to faulting. And there are few mountains here which are called as Western Cordilleras. And this figure shows the highest mountain peaks in each of the continents. Mount McKinley is the highest peak of North America, and Mount Aconcagua, which is part of Andes, is the highest peak in South America, and Kilimanjaro in Africa. Elbrus is in Europe. Other important mountain in Europe is Mount Blanc, which is in Alps. The highest peak in Australia is Puncak Jaya, which is a part of Indonesia, though this part of Indonesia is comes under continent Australia. And the highest mountain in mainland Australia is Kosciuszko, and in Asia it's Everest, and in Antarctic region it is Vinson Massif. Let's see some important mountain ranges. Andes are the longest continental mountain range in the world. They are spread across all these countries, namely Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. And Mount Aconcagua is the highest peak outside Asia. It is about 7,000 meters in high, and the world's highest volcano, namely Ozos del Salado, is on the borders of Chile and Argentina. And Ural Mountains are the most important mineral source for Russia, and they are the oldest fold mountain systems in the world, and they're also rich in precious and semi-precious stones. And Atlas Mountains are present in northwestern Africa. Mount Tobkal is the highest peak in these mountains. They are spread across Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Morocco is somewhere here. Algeria and Tunisia is somewhere here. And the next one are Rocky Mountains. They are the second longest mountain system in the world. They are spread across Canada, New Mexico, and USA. And with this, we have discussed all important mountain systems. Thanks for watching.